It's Sociology Sunday. Today we're going to be talking about the basics of sociological theory. I happen to be planning a sociology course for undergraduates. Most of what I'm talking about today is based off of the book that I tend to use for my development of sociological theory course. It's an upper level course for undergraduates majoring in sociology. So I like to use the Contemporary Sociological Theory and Its Classical Roots, the Basics by Ritzer and Stepnitzky. Here I've used the 5th edition, but the 6th edition is also available. Sociological theory is a set of interrelated ideas that allow for the systematization of knowledge of the social world, the explanation of that world, predictions about the future of that world, and which are falsifiable through empirical research. So theory provides a possible answer to questions like, why did this happen? Or why did they do that? Which means that theory is speculation, not fact. But unlike ideas generally, theory is speculation driven by a more formal systematic process, which incorporates the work of previous theorists and research findings. So, where do these theories come from? Who creates them? And who exactly is out there testing them to see if they're falsifiable? Largely from the sociologists whose work comprises the sociological canon. See, some theories are more popular than others. Some theories, while unpopular, are considered pivotal to the foundation of sociology. Sociological canon helps us identify the popular and pivotal theories. These theories are sort of like the cool mom in Mean Girls. I'm old, so this is the original Mean Girls. Right? Other theories exist, other moms exist, but these are the ones we tend to think of when we think of the mom in Mean Girls, or in this case, sociological theory. Now, this term might leave you scratching your head. A canon? So we aren't talking about the camera company or the weapon. Instead, the sociological canon is defined as the theories, ideas, and texts that have historically been considered the most important in the field of sociology. Critics of the canon argue that it's not a neutral construction, rather that it's affected by power and the politics of the theory, which is kind of true. It's historically privileged theories that have testable hypotheses, known as positivist theories, and theories produced by white men faculty. So not just white dudes with jobs. In this, we can see that the canon and relatedly the field of sociology have tended to reflect power structures in society more broadly. Which means that, yes, technically the canon is full of theories created by old white dude philosophers in Europe. And these philosophers were writing in the late 1800s to early 1900s. Nowadays, most sociologists agree that the canon includes more than just Marx, Weber, and Durkheim. The canon is now considered to include theories from other classical theorists writing during the same time as Marx, Weber, Durkheim, people like W.E.B. Du Bois and Ida B. Wells. Here's Du Bois right here. The canon has also expanded in the last 40 or so years to include contemporary theories, such as emancipatory, feminist, and queer theories. So these expansions were important steps towards accounting for the reality of the field as it presently exists, and to correctly reflect the field's foundations, which expand far beyond whiteness, masculinity, and Western imperial culture. Presently, women make up the quantitative majority of sociology faculty. And while this women majority was historically white, the number of women, including and especially women of color in sociology, continues to grow. The pace of women in sociology is substantially outpacing white men. I really like this figure from Ritzer and Stepnitzky's Contemporary Sociological Theory and Its Classical Roots, 5th edition, because it gives a really good overview of a lot of the canon over time. So here we can see it's much more than just 3 or 4 theorists, and that it expands much further beyond the early 1900s. Here I've circled 4 theorists of foundational importance to the field of sociology: Karl Marx, Max Weber, Emile Durkheim, and W.E.B. Du Bois. They're classical theorists, and their theories are considered grand theories because they tend to be aimed at explaining the whole of society rather than some particular event, circumstance, or context. Not all classical theories are considered grand by all sociologists, but if you have a grand theory, it tends to be lumped in with classical. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But besides linear time, the thing that most distinguishes our contemporary theories from their classical counterparts is the development of theoretical paradigms post-classical era. So on the chart, it's these italic labels here. And so on and so forth. So we start to see in the 1930s onward the emergence of paradigms like structuralism, symbolic interactionism, conflict paradigm, etc. To further stress the importance of paradigms over linear time, back to this idea of grand theories being classical. I'll point out that some sociologists would consider the cutoff between contemporary and classical theory to look something like this instead. So moving from here to here. And it's because we have 2 grand theorists who come quite a bit later than the initial 4. So Talcott Parsons and B.F. Skinner also provide theories that are really grand, overarching explanations for society as a whole system. And they're intended to explain pretty much everything. And of course, because sociologists don't love to agree on things, there are segments of sociologists who feel strongly that all of the classical theories may be considered grand. I could draw little circles all over everybody there, or I could just take all the circles away. Sometimes theories are the driving force behind research, constituting the research question for an empirical study. Or if not constituting the whole question, at least pointing to the questions that need to be asked. You begin with the possible answer to the question, the theory or its propositions. You investigate, see if it holds up, and your results may call into question some of the theory's propositions, or it may not. This whole process is called deductive reasoning. So remember, starting with theory and then moving to observation, deductive. Theory is not always the starting point, though. Sometimes theory is generated from research. So maybe you have a question, but you're not actually sure what the answer is. Or if you have some idea what the answer is, you don't think that you're qualified to make that call. So you want to go out and see people who are qualified to make that call and make some observations and then draw theory based on that. And this whole process is called inductive reasoning. So you start with your observations, come up with some conclusions, and then you generate some new ideas about the social world. Inductive reasoning. Empirical means theoretically rooted research. Sociological research tends to be empirical, tends to be driven by theory. A lot of times you'll see inductive and deductive reasoning attached to either qualitative or quantitative research. And there is some truth to that. So deductive reasoning is often linked with quantitative research. Quantitative researchers usually have some idea of theory before forming their research question. And some quantitative research is even constructed with the goal of testing or really falsifying theoretical propositions. So here, you're going to have things like hypotheses, which are based on your theory. Qualitative research, in contrast, often uses inductive reasoning. So they're beginning with the observation and developing theory as part of the study's conclusions. That's not always the case with qualitative research, though. So, one approach to creating contemporary sociological theory assumes that the best theory is constructed via inductive reasoning and thus begins with observation, absent of pre existing ideas. Instead of having hypotheses, you want to eliminate those from your head. This is known as grounded theory because it produces theory that is grounded in observation of tangible facts instead of the more abstract ideas that come from theory that is not grounded. So this is a sort of move away from accusations that theorists are just out there philosophizing. So the sociologists Barney Glaser and Anselm Strauss are often credited with popularizing this grounded theory approach. And that was way back in 1967. Other approaches, like content analysis, might start with theory. The key is those approaches can also start with observation. So here you can also see that qualitative research is a little bit more dynamic and involved sometimes than quantitative research is. So to summarize, sociological theory is a set of interrelated ideas about the social world, and these ideas are unique, allowing for the creation of systems of knowledge about the social world, the explanation of the social world, predictions about the future of the social world, and which are falsifiable through empirical research, meaning they allow for a process of challenging existing knowledge about the social world.